First name, James, last name, Austin, both spelled Jamesaustin.
What year were you born and in what city and state?
Year was 1946. The city, Steubenville, state, Ohio.
Can you tell us about the time when you were born, who your parents are, and where you are from?
Well, that's going to be a interesting conversation. First of all, I was born a twin. We both were adopted at birth to two different families. So we weren't raised together. I didn't meet my twin brother until I was 17. But going back to the birthdays, the reason that we are in Columbus is because I had severe asthma. And the doctors in Steubenville suggested that they take me to Columbus, Ohio, to Children's Hospital. Now, at that time, Steubenville was known as the dirtiest city in the country because of the steel mills. So we ventured off to Columbus. I was age 5 and was in a rooming house while my mother was trying to find permanent residence.
And what elementary school did you go to when you came to Columbus?
Before moving to Columbus, I was at Stark Elementary School, which is in Wintersville, Ohio. It's kind of like Lancaster is to Columbus. My first elementary school was Douglas Elementary School on Broad Street. I was in the first grade, but I also was in the first grade in Steubenville. So they actually put me back because I came from a RFD residential neighborhood, meaning the country.
So did you attend Douglas till 5th grade?
No, I went to Douglas in the first grade, and we were blessed to be able to find an apartment in Poindexter. So we moved to Poindexter. Address was 1322 Hawthorne, apartment N. When I did move to Poindexter, I ended up at Eastwood Elementary School.
So tell us about that time. What can you remember about your childhood and your elementary days? What are some of the memories that stand out to you, especially as a resident in Poindexter, a little resident?
Well, one of the things that I now can put into context is that when we moved into Poindexter, one of the key factors was, for me, friendships, trying to find people to play with. And it ended up being from the elementary school. From you walking from Poindexter to the elementary school, and there were people walking with you, they became your new friends. Those friends now I still have today, and luckily that they're still with us. But we would play the magnetic football game where you had a magnet and it was on a football field. We would throw a tennis ball against the wall at the junior high school, and that game was called strikeout. So a lot of this learning how to play sports was based on us playing.
So tell us about the playgrounds around that you could go to in the school, in the area of Poindexter, and the things that you remember.
Poindexter was de facto isolated. That means everything that we had was in what I would call the compound. The grocery store, the drugstore, the hospital, the school. I mean, we did not have to, even though it wasn't a fence around it, we did not have to go outside of the fence to get services. So the school happened to be across the street from my apartment. So I can remember many times waiting until the tardy bell rung to get up to go to school because it was a 3 minute walk, you know. So a lot of that environment created a lot of friendships because we were in a closed in area. Not that didn't have privacy, but we just had contact with each other quickly.
Okay, wonderful. So, are there any memories you might have as a child when you think of the businesses in the area? What are some of the things that you recall about the businesses in when you were most young?
Well, too young to talk about probably one of the greatest streets in Columbus at the time I was young was Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon, if I remember, was about 4 blocks away from my apartment. I was too young to go to one of the entertainment lounges called the Jamaica, but as kids, we snuck in anyway. Uh, we had furniture stores. Surprisingly, my mother had an account at a furniture store, and I remember she bought a couch, and her monthly payment was $2 a month. But it was that type of neighborhood where people were sort of helping each other. Had a clothing store, uh, had what we used to know as Carl Brown's Market, uh, probably similar to what today would be called Save-A-Lot, but it had that size store. Um, the smaller stores, or what we call it, convenience stores, where we would get our candy, our nut chews, our bubble gum, our all those penny candies, was within a block of walking. Uh, After we would be playing football between the apartments, which was a grass uh, layout, we would all run to the store and give them our pennies, and they gave us candy.
So, what middle school did you attend?
Champion Junior High School. Uh, I think Champion was the time I recognized and started to understand development. Um, for somehow, my mother set me up with the band director at East High School, which was Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner gave private lessons during the summer. So therefore, I took private lessons during the summer with Mr. Turner. I was also in the band at Champion Junior High School with Mr. Lanier. I was in the choir with Mr. Smith, and that kind of activity kept me, I think, out of trouble because I was committed to doing stuff. And finally, and as part of that whole experience, I made the all-state band and all-state choir in junior high school.
What additional memories do you have around Champion Middle School and its being so close to Poindexter Village?
Champion Junior High School and the playground were side by side. So therefore, the basketball court, the swings, the hopscotch, everything that we did as far as playing was right there. I remember a game called Monkey Move Up. That was like, 10 or more people would be on the baseball field. We would have bases, first, second, third, and everybody would take a position. If you strike out or get thrown out, you go to right field. The pitcher comes to catch. The catcher comes to bat. So it was a rotational game, a lot of fun, both girls and boys. And along with across the I guess down the street, meaning was the basketball court, always crowded. So a lot of activity.
When you were a child, what role did the recreation center play?
I would put the recreation center and its staff as equal to my teachers at Champion and junior high school. At the time, who now we would know him as a city councilman, we had Mr. Roseborough, we had Mr. Williams, we had Mr. Turner, and being part of a single parent family, they ended up being that father role model. And I think that is really powerful to say that some parents that were coaches in the Little League football team, the Beatty Lions or the Maryland ACs that I played on, were parents and created, a football league where we played football. That was at age 12, age 14. By the way, getting us ready to be able to play sports in high school. So activity-wise, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Union Grove Baptist Church, a community church, was instrumental in development, especially me, because they created. I mean, these were a competition for lack of the word competition, but if you were in the Boy Scouts and you didn't get a badge for being able to tie a knot, or for being able to camp, or for being able to do something, and you had this strap across your chest, and you had all your badges, and you were the one that didn't have any badges, that's not a good picture. So I love that as I think about it now. I love the fact that we used to, while people were in church, we would come out and wash their windows. And, there was a person leading this, which was a parent from somewhere in the neighborhood called the Scoutmaster. And first time I went on a camping trip, I thought I was in Arizona, but it was Camp Lazarus right up on Delaware, So here I am, a camping trip, overnight, eating powdered eggs and all the things, these were experiences. You're like, well, I don't think I want to do this for a living, but loved it. Loved the fact that I achieved tenderfoot as a Boy Scout, and no, didn't go to be an Eagle Scout. But the fact is that I'm trying to explain that the neighborhood had so many opportunities to develop you. And, I certainly can talk about how that has played into my life. I went to Mount Zion Church of God in Christ, and it's on Atchison and Bassett. Another area where I had some of the best friends that I still have today. Remember falling asleep on the pew in church. I remember sneaking out of church, going to the store to get candy with my other friends. So we had a little, I call it my little church gang, a real good people. Out of all of this, if you look back at everybody that I had a connection with in Poindexter, I can't say many people that weren't successful today because of the structure, the tradition, the number of people that was in your life to keep you. When somebody went astray in Poindexter, you knew it, because the neighborhood just was that close-knit.
Something I'm curious to know, when you think about the youth in the area, would you say that mostly all of the apartments had young people in them? Were there tons of children? What was the atmosphere like when you think about the number of young people in the village?
I think the majority of the households in Poindexter were single parents and children. I do know that several of my friends, there was a two-parent household. Uh, don't know the condition, but it was a two-parent household. But we had uh, a lot of the kids, uh, different ages, uh, and uh, they were participating in different things. So Red Rover, you know, hopscotch. I mean, you know, bicycle races. I mean, I did not know until today or understand how my mother was able to provide me with the things that she did. Like, you know, it might be insignificant, but a bicycle. I mean, I didn't know we were poor. You know, we just had a lot of love. I had everything I needed. I had a school, I had neighborhood, I had a bicycle, I had a TV. We used to watch what a TV show that Sky King and Captain Midnight and uh, the Soul Train. I mean, all of those were images that we saw. I don't know if we kind of said, this is what we want to do, but this was what was being programmed to us, along with the leadership that would tell us, you don't get to see that program.
So, what about your experiences with the carnivals and festivals?
That was a secret. And the secret is this: our apartment was on Clifton Avenue. The carnival was in a lot on Clifton Avenue, and the Ferris wheel was right in front of my bedroom window. So therefore, when the Ferris wheel go around, I could actually not reach out. I thought I could reach out and touch the Ferris wheel, but you know, some of my friends we would get up into my bedroom and somebody would say, I bet you can't jump on the Ferris wheel from here. Now, first of all, we were all sane, and that's not what we were going to do. But the carnival was special. Every year it would come. We would love the activity. We would ride the rides. We would eat the popcorn and the candy corn and whatever that's called now, all that sugar, you know. So that was a highlight film for Poindexter.
The carnival, when you say carnival, was it the Poindexter Carnival? What carnival are you referring to?
It was more rides, like the fairgrounds.
Okay, okay.
You know, similar to the fairgrounds, minus the animals, you know. But it was all rides: the Ferris wheel, the merry-go-round, the tilt-a-whirl. I'm kind of thinking of all the names there, but
So this was an annual carnival that would come to Poindexter Village?
yes, every year, at least every year until I think they built some apartments in that area, and therefore I don't think it was there anymore. But then again, I was probably older and probably didn't miss it as much. But as a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, absolutely special.
Okay, so tell us, what high school did you go to?
There's only one. You know, I went to East High School. Uh, as I look back on it and think about all the high schools in the country, I do not think, and I think the only one that I could probably match it up to is that movie called Cooley High. East High School to me was like a Cooley High. It was 99.9% black. We had some of the best teachers that anyone could have, and I'm talking about not only teaching, leading. We took, interesting enough, we took attendance seriously. You know, all of my friends, we went to school. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, hey, let's not go to school. We looked forward to going to school, and especially when we were younger and everybody showed up at school with the same outfits on from Charity Newsies, So we didn't have an issue. We were happy and doing wonderful things and growing up as a young person. Another situation at East High School, because I was a musician, I played in the band, the orchestra. I also was the drum major. And so that was an enormous amount of fun, because the marching band was known all over the city as one of the best in the area. So instead of folks leaving at halftime, everybody stayed in the stands to watch the marching band. So I add that as another part of life that was developed, all the way to get to that point of being selected to be the drum major and composer of the East High School Mighty Marching Band.
If you could tell the future generations, what does East High School mean to the community? In a few words, what would you say?
I would say East High School as brick and mortar, not much. East High School as the staff, as the people, as the organization, as the learning instrument, was what I call the best part of East High School. If you took all of the things out of East High School, the building, and put it in another building, it would be the same thing, because it was the people. It was the leadership. It was the teachers. It was the folks that cared.
East High School, you graduated in what year?
I graduated in 1965.
And were there any activities like tennis club or anything that you were doing at the time?
In 65?
Or in high school, was there any activities outside of band that you were involved in, like maybe the youth tennis club or any of those things?
Other than, well, the band is normally, the band is during football season. Marching band is during football season. The stage band is after that. The orchestra is after that. The choir, the going to all-state choir and all-state band was after that. I wasn't the best student. I mean, what I mean is that I barely made honor roll, but I did. And I frankly had more fun being in the cafeteria as a cafeteria helper, But the fact is that the people, the kids, that's what it drove me to come to school. I just loved being there. Part of the recreation center wasn't Poindexter Recreation Center. It was Beatty Park Recreation Center, which is side by side, across the street, so we could go to either one of them. The Beatty Tennis Club was an adult tennis club, organized, and they would play tennis over there, and we would stand as little people at the fence and watch them play tennis. So one of the members of the Beatty Tennis Club came out and said, "Do you guys want to learn how to play tennis?" Now, I think we were 8. And when we of course, we're going to learn how to play tennis. So they took us over, and every other day at 5 o'clock, we would go for tennis lessons. After a year of tennis lessons, we were part of the youth Beatty Tennis Club, and we got to travel with the tennis club to places like Indianapolis, and we played against other youth, and so that again, the adults that helped us develop and brought us into different types of activities is again different for not different for me, but different for the fact that all of this was happening in what I keep calling it the compound, but it was Poindexter Village, and all this was there. You know, we didn't have to catch a bus and go somewhere else to learn how to do something.
Okay, when you think of the youth peoples or the Easter Sunday school
Yeah,
things at church.
yeah. I I made I made a point of that because how do you learn to read? How do you learn to do different things? And one of the things that the church did, along with the school, is that on Easter, our parents would force us to learn a Easter speech by heart. Now, the older you got, the more pages you had to remember. Now, that was, as you think about it now, that was development. You know, you got on stage, you made a presentation, and everybody applauded because you got through it safely. You know, the church had a young people's group where we would meet, and this wasn't talking about all the time the Bible. This was talking about life and things that we needed to do to be successful.
Okay. What about your experiences with Little League sports?
I think I referred to the Beatty Lions and the Maryland Seas was the Little League football team, and that the parents of some of the players were the coaches. Um, they were volunteers, and after school, you had two things to do to be on the team. First of all, school was out at 3:30. Um, you had to prove that you did your homework, and therefore you could go to practice at 5. We went around the city and played different little league teams. I do remember one from the South End called Duckworth Plumbers. They were very good, and so gained a lot of friends. One of the things I did learn from that is that as I got older and had a family myself, I moved different places in the corporation, and I had to find a place where when my kids would go to a different school, how difficult it would be for them to develop friends. What we found out was because they played sports, that's where their new friends were. And so we made sure that that was a component of their education.
So after you graduated from East High School,
Mm.
what was your next step?
Well, in the 1960s, we were not fortunate enough to be able to avoid the draft. So therefore, I had a low lottery number, and I went to Ohio University during the summer of 1965, and that fall, before I returned to school, my lottery number came up, and I received a draft notice. At the same time, 30 days later, they passed the deferment rule for colleges. So I was a month away from being deferred from going into the service because I was in college. So therefore, I ended up making a decision not to go to the Army, but to enlist into the United States Navy. During that time of boot camp, um, because of my experience of being a drum major, I was asked to try out for a ceremonial guard, which is similar to the honor guards of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers in Washington, D.C. So instead of getting the orders that told me that I would be going to a PT boat in Vietnam, I ended up going to Andrews Air Force Base for honor guard training for the U.S. Navy. So again, opportunity because of things that happen in your life. I ended up being honor guard. I ended up being on the USS Constitution, which is in Boston Naval Shipyard. We would give tours. I also was the driver for the Admiral of the 1st Naval District. So my experience in the Navy was lovely. Had my own apartment over the garage, so that was a good experience. So when I did leave the Navy, and the reason was I got a hardship discharge. My mother was ill, and therefore they then released me from the Navy to come home and care for her. So that was my military experience.
When you returned from the Navy, you came to take care of your mother.
Yes.
Where was your mother living? Tell us the state in which, was she here in Columbus?
Oh yeah, she was still in Poindexter. She was still in Poindexter, and during that period of time, we were on Clifton Avenue. So I came back, and therefore came for her. She had rheumatoid arthritis. It got so bad that she was in a wheelchair. So because we were in a stairs to the bedrooms, a lot of that, I had to carry upstairs and bring her downstairs. But that was, that wasn't even issue. That was the love of my life. So I did everything I could to care for her. We finally got her over to, it used to be called 1100 East Broad Street, which is a senior citizen building. They had medical staff. They had, entertainment, great place for seniors. I then was able to move into an apartment. Now, the tricky thing that I did was I got a telephone. I don't know if you remember the private line just came up. We had a 4-party line where 4 people could be on the phone at the same time, different people that don't know each other. And so I had a line extended to my apartment from my mother's apartment to make sure that I was in contact with her all the time. So that was one of the things that happened. When I left the Navy, the first day getting back, I ran into, and I wish I could remember this person's name. I was walking down 3rd Street and Broad, and he stopped me and said, "Hey, what you doing?" I said, "Well, I just got discharged from the Navy and I'm looking for a job." He said, "Oh, okay. Here's my card. I want you to call me." Okay. Next thing I know, I call him. A week later, I'm employed at the liquor department as a computer tab operator, which started my career in technology. So therefore, I was able to get to learn the IBM 360 machine. I was able to learn how to program PO1. And so, again, an opportunity that puts you in a situation that kind of develops you for your life. After that, I ended up with what I call my special program, my first special program, which was called CMACOA, Columbus Metropolitan Area Community Organization. Another highlight film. My mentors, Curtis Brooks and Eddie Parks, who brought me on as a supervisor of counselors, And my job was to take disadvantaged people to Ohio State, either in the business college, the social work college, or the education college. They would be there for 2 years, half day. The other half, they would be employed in a company. And after that period of time, we had a 60% success rate. Many of them stayed in college for a baccalaureate degree or a master's or a PhD. I was with CMACOA for 5 years. During that period of time, I ended up going to Ohio State at the same time, and I came out of the business school. After I graduated from the business school, I was recruited by Ford Motor Company in Detroit as a labor relations representative. So in 1973, I ended up moving to Detroit. One of the things that's really funny about this is that I don't think anyone, including me, ever experienced Atlas moving van, the big semi-tractor trailer coming up to your house, and packing all your stuff and shipping it to Detroit. Now, my friends, we were all sitting there with our mouth open, like, this, we don't know what this is, but it's really happening. So I ended up in Detroit with Ford Motor Company. After about 2 years at Ford, we had the energy crisis. I don't know if you remember the cars that were wrapped around gas stations in 1973. So they laid off anyone that had 7 years or less experience in the automotives. So that was one of those, okay, you brought me all the way to Detroit at the headquarters, Ford Motor headquarters, and now I'm going to have a job. Well, they had a outstanding separation plan. So for a year, I ended up enjoying the complex that I lived at that had a golf course, a lake, a tennis court. So again, I'm young now, so I was having a lot of fun. Did some research, found out what companies laid off people in 1929. And I found out that the telephone company was one of those companies that did not lay off anyone in 1929. So I put my application in to AT&T. Interviewed, was offered a job in New York with AT&T. A week before I was supposed to start, they called and said, well, we have a company in Michigan, because I was living in Michigan, called Michigan Bell. Do you want to come to AT&T New York, or do you want to stay in Detroit at Michigan Bell? Well, easy answer, because I was still close to my mother. I was able to get to her when needed, so I stayed at Michigan Bell. To make this a short story, I ended up leaving Michigan Bell in the Bell system in 1997 as a vice president. So again, I entrust all of this to how everything happened for me and to me during the Poindexter Village era, during the East High School era, during my young career era. In 1997, if you remember, AT&T came back and bought out it was called SBC at the time, and all the vice presidents received a separation package, which we all went dancing to the bank, and therefore AT&T took over, and that's the company that you know of today. Yeah, that was a breakup.
But didn't that happen in Columbus here too at the same time?
Oh, all across the country.
All across country?
Yeah.
So my grandfather on my mother's side, Wilbur Harris,
Yeah.
was a part of that same thing. In '97, he got a opportunity to retire, basically. It was like
we all got the golden
ama-
parachute.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
So
that was that you certainly aged me then. You know, but the fact is that when someone says the golden parachute, you got to make sure they understand what that means. You can get a separation package. You know, that means that you get so much money for the number of years that you're here. You know, if you were at a certain level, you know, and if he got, you know, that package, you know, I was an officer and a vice president. That was money you don't know about. You know, that was the bonus, that was the 401k, and that was, here's what we're going to give you because we're going out of business. So all the officers, and there are 35 of us, got this package in 1997. I didn't have to work again ever in life, you know, if I managed it right. No. But the fact is that that's what's happening. I did not know any of the Ohio Bell people because I was raised at Michiganville. And somebody said, well, do you know George from Chicago? Yeah, right, you know. But we were under the same organization. We all received the same rules. I was blessed enough at my last assignment to be in human resources. So I was handling a lot of the benefit stuff and all like that. So it's you know, that was the good old days. It's not the same now.
So when did you venture back to Columbus?
I came back to Columbus in 2005. Well, I was doing consulting, and I wasn't happy about the opportunities to be a consultant. One of the things that I was consulting in was human resources or process mapping or reengineering. And reengineering again came is because when AT&T, before AT&T, all the companies merged. So you need to take all those companies and develop one service order flow. So I became trained and an expert in that type of stuff. But small businesses don't have the money to afford a consultant. So what I decided to do, I said, okay, I have a choice of going to Chicago, coming back to New York, going to Detroit, or coming to Columbus. Came back to Columbus because that's where I had all my friends.
So when you came back in 2005 and you saw the changes that had happened with the freeway system being put in, how do you think that affected what were some of the things that you noticed that changed, and how did that affect your perspective on the neighborhood?
Yeah. Well, as I look at it today, and when I came back, didn't have enough information to know the impact of it. I mean, certainly, I had people like Tom Dillard and others who kind of shared, this is what happened with the freeway. This is how it changed things. I do remember a lot of kids who had moved outside of East High School to another neighborhood, and they would try to figure out how to get a address to be able to come back to East. The same thing probably could have happened with the freeway. I do not know, and I still probably would like to know, is what happened to Poindexter Village after 1980. I mean, it went from the neighborhood that I know and loved and got developed in, and the other friends of me got developed in, to something that I can't even articulate. I don't know what happens when the a family organization where you have the parent, grandparent, and others, and the grandparent is gone. Therefore, there's no leadership down, and therefore uh, you have folks that don't have uh, uh, development opportunities, or how it clusters and it grows and it just becomes what some people now know and have told me about what the Poindexter Village had become. So again, I'm not sure I'm the right person to say I wasn't here when all that happened. All I know is that my my spotlight is on the years that I was there, and certainly if I had a magic wand, I would hit it to hope that another neighborhood like Poindexter could be here in the 21st century.
Who are some of your peers that came out of Poindexter Village that stand out to you that you highly respect?
Um, boy, I need a list. um, is one of the things that I have to be careful of is that when I say highly respect, it's not a person that runs for office, gets into the office, and therefore you respect them because of their title. You know, it's not the person that is uh, uh, doing some things that you know is not appropriate. What I like is all of the people out of my high school that I know today that are absolutely a citizen and doing good regardless to their income level. And so I got to use the word respect for the group. I got to do, and because they came through the same car wash that I came through. And this is how they ended up. All of us ended up somewhere different, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't notorious. It was, you know, a citizen, raised a family, and always doing the right thing.
So, what church did you go to?
I went to Mount Zion Church of God in Christ on Atchison and Bassett.
Tell us a little bit about that church.
My growth part of that church certainly began when I was 5 in Columbus, because that's the church we went to. I remember Sunday school. I do not remember being absent for Sunday school. And of course, I didn't get a decision in that, but I remember Sunday school. I remember learning, you know. I remember having to stand up in church and read out loud at age 8, 9, 10. You know, I, I remember the conditioning of certainly Pentecostal women of no makeup and long dresses and long sleeve dresses. Not something that I said was bad or good. I'm just saying that that's the environment that I was in. It was a holiness environment. It was there was no bad news at all. I remember the church dinners, and one of the fascinating thing that I do today is that when a church has a church dinner, they pick someone in the church that is a specialist of one dish. So if you get 5 or 10 people that can do different dishes, that becomes the church dinner. My mother always was picked to do the barbecue, and yeah, well, let's stick with barbecue. Now, where did she learn that? Well, I found that out because when she came from Jasper, Alabama to Pittsburgh, her dad owned a barbecue store or shop on what they call the Hill in Pittsburgh. So that's where she learned the barbecue sauce. Therefore, she comes to Columbus with this sauce, and everybody says, "Oh, great sauce." Of course, everybody said, like, "Why don't you brand it?" Well, I wasn't old enough to know how to do that. But anyway, uh, the activities in the church was powerful. Um, I was so conditioned that I just knew that this part of time in my life was church, this part of time in my life was play, and this part of my time in my life was school. And so it was almost an unbelievable structure of kept you grounded.
What kind of services did you have? What kind of services? What
At
was?
church,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, it kind of blurs together because the services that I'm thinking of is that they have the revivals, you know. Uh, uh, One of the things that I became upset about is because, of course, my mother was uh, uh, over the women's department for the state of Ohio, so she would always invite an evangelist, a traveling evangelist, to stay at our house, and I would always be mad because he would take the last piece of chicken. So, you know, we that was just the way it was, when we had guests. Uh, I I remember the the minister who was a hunter and gave me a little part-time job to feed his dogs when he was away. So again, it's hard to say little things that happen at Brothers Church as much as things that happen as a result of church, things that happen as a result of school, things that happen as far as the recreation program, or the playground. Is just all of that was going on at the same time.
Who was the pastor that you remember?
The pastor is Reverend R. H. Holmes, Holmes. Uh, uh, Matter of fact, he he named he named all of us kids had a name. Uh, he nicknamed me Nicodemus. I've been wondering for years, was Nicodemus a good guy or a bad guy?
Could you tell us a little bit about your mom? Like, you've talked about her, but could you give us a little bit of her background? What was her name? And
Oh, okay. Her name was Janet Austin. Um, she was from Jasper, Alabama. Somehow ended up via Pittsburgh into Steubenville. Was married to James Austin in Steubenville. Um, she didn't. She had a sixth grade education, but became over the women's department for the state of Ohio. Now, that's brain power. I mean, to do that, because in a church, it's all volunteer. And if you are a leader in a church, that means that you can get people to do things that doesn't include compensation. And to be over the women's department for the state of Ohio today, I understand, it was powerful. Now I can see how I picked up some of those skills and traits. But her everyday life was church, was me, was making a good living for us. A highlight film of that is when she would go to a church because she's a missionary to teach. They would give her an offering, and I remember this clearly. She would bring this brown bag back home and lay it on the table in the kitchen. And I think I'm 8 years old. And she would dump it out on the kitchen table, and it had dollar bills or bills and change. And she says, I want you to take a third of it and put it in this pile. I want you to take another third in that pile and a third in this pile. And so after I a couple times learned how to do that, I would ask her, well, what are these thirds for? She said, this third is for the home church minister. This third is for the minister of the church that I spoke at. And this third is ours. And I said, well, why isn't all of it ours? But that's the business of the church. And the more I learned, how all that works, that's how that story. So that's the way it happens today too, by the way.
Did she travel around doing ministry, or did she stay pretty local?
Say that again.
Did she travel to do her ministry, or did she stay local?
Oh, state of Ohio.
Okay, just
all of the Church of God in Christ, be it a storefront or a large church. She was over the women's department, so they would have conventions. Back in the day, the largest convention was for the Church of God in Christ was in Memphis, Tennessee. And we would go there. They would have the state of Ohio convention. She would grab me by the hand. I just remember being drugged in by the hand, and people would say hello to me, and the first thing they would say is, you're Sister Austin's son. They never knew my name. They say, this is Sister Austin's son. Okay. So then I would have my other friends that was part of the church, and we would be out in the tent playing and stuff. Again, good times. So as I tried to paint her resume, it was mostly the leadership in the church. It was mostly taking care of the household. She was extremely dependent, and that wasn't wrong, on the men in the neighborhood, the Cubs Boy Scout leader, the football coach. She would seek out someone to take me to the father and son banquet, because didn't have a father. So it was how she went about developing these type of activities should be documented.
What was your first job you ever had?
First job ever? The first job I had was paperboy. I carried the Citizen Journal. I wish I knew the year, but I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning with my bicycle, with the saddle bags, with the papers in the back, which other paper boys with me, we would have a contest of who could ride the bike and fold the paper and hit the front door at the same time. Become a game, but that was the first job. The first professional job was with the liquor department after I got out of service, and then of course it evolved from there.
You had mentioned you name dropped Roseboro.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know your memories around him.
Oh, well, see, I have two classifications.
Okay.
First of all, I didn't know the age gap between me and Mr. Roseborough at East High School, but it wasn't far. I mean, but he was a teacher. That's all that counted. That means he was important. Um, but over the years after he left uh, East and became, I think he was at Borden, you know, he was also a mentor. And when I say a mentor, that gave me somebody to look at that is doing something in a corporation. I I I, I don't want to make a big deal out of what you see is what you can be, but what I saw when I was 16, 17, and a young lady from Eastgate, which I thought was across the tracks from Poindexter, asked me to take her to the cotillion. That was extremely powerful. Here I am, a Poindexter child. I'm now in a tuxedo, never have been in a tuxedo in my life. And I'm in a cotillion where we're escorting all these lovely people on these gigantic outfits in the dance. Well, why did I get this opportunity? What that did for me, it gave me a vision. I want to be like that. That's what I want to be. You know, I want to be like whoever their parents are that put them here. That started the whole thing for me. So now we talk about, when he went to city council, you know, again, a mentor. His growth I was seeing, and therefore there's my growth. There's only a couple, and I mean, I don't want to say there wasn't more, but Mr. Roseborough, and by the way, Mr. Turner, who was the band leader, was actually my de facto father. Um, I remember him picking me up and against the wall with my feet hanging down, you know, and because I was devilish, but I was not outside of the rules where you can be led into something that's not good. So I can't say enough for Mr. Turner, Mr. Roseborough. Uh, you notice I didn't say Mr. Jack Gibbs, so we leave that off the table, you know. But but he was powerful for the school, you know. Um, Lee Williams. Uh, that was the staff. I don't know how we got to be blessed with that kind of staff, but it was. We had some white teachers that were outstanding. I mean, that had been there a long time. I mean, Tom can mention some that was there when Miss Ward in uh, Problems of Democracy. I was so scared of Miss Ward, I took POD, which it was called, in summer school to avoid being in her class. But she was an outstanding teacher. Uh, uh, Miss Buckner, who Lucius, Lucius was in the band with me, her son. I just keep saying it's the teachers, it's the people that set the stage for your vision. I saw Poindexter as an outstanding environment of which a single parent can raise a child, and that child can take off from the learnings that happen within Poindexter and be something else. Now, if I take a snapshot of that, all I'm saying is that because we were disadvantaged economically, didn't change the fact that I didn't get the richness of a full development in Poindexter, just like somebody that was in Upper Arlington or someone that was somewhere else. So I get confused on the fact that we were good too. I mean, and I want to tell that story, but I don't want the story to sound like, well, it was just like another place. No, the people in Poindexter overcame a lot of stuff to get all of us. Let me call it. Let's see. Sometime born in '46, we moved into Poindexter '51. So the '50s, '60s generation of me in Poindexter is why I'm where I am today. And to build that environment, it takes all of these pieces to be working together. And that's what happened in Poindexter. All the pieces were working together. And if you could get a community like that, where all the pieces are working together, then you have duplicated Poindexter.